The Metal Gear franchise for decades has been at a level above everyone else when it comes to storytelling in video games. Over the years, with every successive release, Hideo Kojima has managed to make it easier for people to argue in favor that video games are indeed a proper medium for storytelling. Many would argue that both the series and Kojima himself went rather far away from that approach with Metal Gear Solid 5, Ground Zeroes, and The Phantom Pain, with more focus on game design and emergent gameplay than storytelling. Still, others would argue that modern contenders like BioWare's Mass Effect, Naughty Dog's Uncharted and The Last of Us, and CD Projekt Red's The Witcher 3 have made equally important contributions to moving video game storytelling forward. And both those arguments would be right in their own way. But the one thing that remains indisputably true is the fact that the Metal Gear and Metal Gear Solid games have always been the frontrunners when it comes to pushing forward the cinematic quality on video games. However, despite that, a lot of people usually have one criticism in common for this series, that the story is ultimately a bit of a mess. Only the very keen-eyed fans who pay dedicated attention to the game's stories and follow their several twists and turns with sincere devotion are able to keep the entire storyline straight in their heads. Kojima has a habit of throwing curveballs at his audiences, and they're not always too grounded in reality, so it makes sense that for a lot of people, it's hard to keep track. To that effect, we're going to start off this multi-part feature. We're going to take a look at the Metal Gear story from start to finish in chronological order, in order to make it a little easier, hopefully, for those who are not entirely familiar with the series' lore and narrative, as well as those whose memories just need to be refreshed. Obviously, there will be spoilers ahead, but you knew that going in. In part 1 of our recap of the Metal Gear franchise, we will take a look at the events surrounding the Virtuous mission and Operation Snake Eater in Metal Gear Solid 3, which is the very first game in the Metal Gear chronology. Metal Gear Solid 3 takes place in 1964, when the United States of America and the USSR are right in the middle of the Cold War. In 1962, a scientist named Sokolov, who is the Soviet Union's foremost weapons developer, defects to the US, requesting that his family also be allowed to defect with him, and the mission turns out to be a success. However, things change considerably after the fateful events of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the US agrees to return Sokolov back to the USSR in secret as part of negotiations between the two nations. He is taken back to a facility called the Design Bureau, where he is tasked with finishing work on a weapon that he had previously been working on. A couple of years later, US intelligence receives word from a mole in Soviet territory that the work on the weapon is nearing completion, and that if allowed to be completed, it could shift the balance of power heavily in the Soviets' favor. Why? Because essentially the weapon, named Shagohod, is a huge tank that can fire nuclear missiles over long distances. The construction of this weapon could spell the end of the Cold War and the beginning of an all-out nuclear war. And this is where a highly skilled special agent codenamed Naked Snake comes into play. A member of the newly formed Fox unit, Snake is dropped deep into enemy territory via the world's first Halo jump, and is tasked with one single mission: to track down Sokolov and bring him back to US territory as quickly as possible, before work on the weapon is completed. While it is a solo mission for Snake, he receives backup via his commanding officer Major Zero and his old mentor, the Boss, via radio transmissions. After sneaking his way through the Soviet facility, Snake finally meets with Sokolov. The scientist informs him that a Russian GRU agent who goes by the name Colonel Volgin is leading an extremist faction. They plan to remove the Soviet premier from power and use the Shagohod to spark a full-scale nuclear conflict between the USSR and the US. With this new information, Snake escorts Sokolov towards the extraction point. Things, however, do not go as planned. He is ambushed by a supporter of Colonel Volgin's, a GRU agent known as Major Ocelot. An intense fight with Ocelot and his unit ensues, but eventually both Snake and Sokolov are able to escape. Not for long, though. As Snake escorts Sokolov further towards the end of his mission, he meets someone he never imagined he would meet, at least not in the circumstances that they meet under. Snake's former mentor, the Boss, stands in his way, accompanied by Volgin. It is revealed that the Boss is actually a Soviet spy now, having defected earlier. A fight between master and student ensues, but it is far from being a close one. Snake is battered into submission with alarming ease, and after injuring him severely, the Boss kicks Snake off a bridge and into the river below, a long way down. Volgin and the Boss reacquire Sokolov as their hostage, while also capturing a KGB spy named Titania, who is believed to be the scientist's lover, and thus a valuable hostage. Volgin then proceeds to blow up Sokolov's design bureau with a mini-nuclear shell in order to test the weapon, much to Ocelot's alarm. While a heavily injured Snake is extracted from enemy territory, Volgin's destruction of the facility sparks an international incident. The Soviet Union believes the attack was initiated by the US, and the two countries are now on the brink of nuclear war. However, it turns out that the USSR is willing to believe the US's claim that it was Sokolov and the defected US agent, the Boss, who were responsible for the attack. All that needs to be done is to eliminate both of them, while also making sure that the Shagohod is destroyed. As such, Naked Snake is sent back into the field deep into enemy territory to carry out Operation Snake Eater. At the beginning of Operation Snake Eater, Snake acquires the help of a woman who is calling herself Eva. Apparently, she is an ex-NSA agent who defected to the Soviet Union some time back and is now tasked with providing Snake assistance during his mission. Snake makes his way through enemy territory and manages to sneak into Volgin's military fortress. Along the way, he squares off against semi-supernatural entities who are all members of the Cobra unit, which is led by the Boss. However, Snake is, once again, soon captured by the Boss and Volgin. Volgin beats Sokolov to death and proceeds to torture Snake with almost all means at his disposal. As things go from bad to worse, events transpire in such a way that leads Ocelot to almost shooting Titania. In the middle of all this confusion, Snake intervenes, and the bullet that was meant for Titania grazes one of his eyes, turning him into the eye patch-wearing legend the world would know him as in the future. Snake soon manages to escape, with the intention of blowing up the hangar where the Shagohod is currently being kept, with Ocelot and Volgin in pursuit. When they finally catch up to Snake, he sees that they have an unconscious Eva in their custody. It turns out she has been posing as Titania, and Volgin found a microfilm on her that contained all the data in the world on something known as the Philosopher's Legacy. So, what is the Philosopher's Legacy? The Philosophers were the most powerful group of people in Russia, China, and the US during World War II, and essentially the most powerful people in the world. The Legacy was a pool of money that they had all created together, worth around $100 billion, and the purpose of this vast sum of money was to finance any and all projects that were deemed essential to winning the war. The creation of the atom bomb, as well as the formation of the Boss's team of special agents, the Cobra unit, were both made possible because of this legacy. After World War II ended, there was infighting amongst the Philosophers, and the Legacy was split up into different bank accounts all across the world. Volgin has long been attempting to bring the totality of the Legacy under his control, and the US has long been trying to beat him to it. The microfilm found on Eva contains information on all transactions related to the Legacy. In the ensuing fight, Snake is able to eliminate Volgin and destroy the Shagohod, completing half of his mission, and finally manages to escape with Eva. However, one half of his mission still remains, and for Snake, that will be the hardest part. He confronts his old mentor, the Boss, who asks him to shoot her. Snake is eventually able to overcome his emotions and kill the Boss, completing his mission. And just when you think the most harrowing spy mission of all time is finally over, Metal Gear Solid 3 throws more curveballs your way than you can imagine. Eva leaves Snake while he is sleeping in the middle of the night, with a tape on which she has recorded several startling revelations. First off, it is revealed that Eva is actually a Chinese spy, a triple agent of sorts, and was sent into Soviet Russia to acquire the microfilm and bring the entirety of the Legacy under China's control. It is then revealed that the Boss never really defected to the Soviet Union either. She was undercover in Volgin's unit with the aim to infiltrate his ranks, find the location of the Legacy, and bring it back under American control. After Volgin destroyed his weapons facility with a nuclear missile, though, her mission had to be changed. She agreed to take the fall for the incident, knowing that she would have to be killed by Snake so that the US could prove their innocence in Volgin's attack. To the world, she will always be the monster who almost sparked a third world war, and no one will know about her acts of heroism and sacrifice except for a select few people. Naked Snake is given the Distinguished Service Cross by the President of the United States, and given the title of Big Boss. However, Snake, who is disillusioned by recent events and is distraught over the Boss's fate, cuts all ties with members of his spy team and leaves the Fox unit. But wait, it's not even over. In a post-credits scene, it is revealed that Ocelot 2 is a double agent, having been working for the CIA all along. Because basically, if you're a character in Metal Gear Solid 3 and you aren't at least a double agent, you're clearly doing something wrong. And that's not even it. Ocelot is the son of the boss and Sorrow. In addition to that, the microfilm that was in Eva's possession was actually a fake. Half of the legacy is in American hands now, with the other half being under Soviet control, restoring balance to the two. And that is the story of Metal Gear Solid 3, the rise of Big Boss and his transformation from soldier to world-renowned legend. And that's the end of Part 1. In Part 2, we'll take a look at the future events of the series. Stay tuned. And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at GamingBolt, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.